a cathedral of wealth called Ethelgard, where champagne flutes chime and secrets are whispered over velvet banquettes, the most powerful sound wasn't the clink of crystal, but the soft thud of a linen napkin hitting the polished floor. Billionaire Julian Thorne, a man who treated people like assets to be liquidated, stared down at his waitress Ella Vance. Her face was a perfect mask of professionalism, but her eyes held the quiet desperation of a daughter drowning in her father's medical bills. His command was simple, delivered with the casual cruelty of a king to a peasant. Pick it up. In that moment, under the silent judgment of the city's elite, he wasn't just asking her to retrieve a napkin. He was demanding she surrender her dignity. He believed he was putting her in her place, a servant meant to be forgotten. He made a fatal miscalculation. He never considered that the woman kneeling before him was about to own the very ground he stood on. The air in Ethelgard, a temple of haute cuisine nestled in the heart of Manhattan, was thick with the scent of money. It smelled of truffles, aged Bordeaux, and the delicate, expensive perfumes of women who had never known a day of hardship. For the patrons it was an escape. For the staff it was a battlefield of quiet, starched linen precision. And for Ella Vance it was a cage, a beautifully gilded one, but a cage nonetheless. Each night Ella moved through the maze of tables with a practiced grace that belied the ache in her feet and the heavier ache in her heart. Her uniform, a simple but elegant black dress, was immaculate. Her hair was pulled back into a severe but neat bun. Her smile was a mask of serene professionalism, a shield against the casual condescension and fleeting whims of the city's elite. Just 2 years ago, Ella had been on the other side of the hospitality world. She'd graduated top of her class from Cornell's prestigious School of Hotel Administration, her future a glittering horizon of management positions and 5-star opportunities. She had a plan, a trajectory. Then her father's diagnosis came, a rare aggressive form of cancer that devoured his health and their family's savings with equal ferocity. Her promising career was shelved indefinitely. The interviews were cancelled. The dream was put on hold, replaced by the grim reality of medical bills and the desperate need for a steady paycheck, any paycheck. So she found herself at Ethelgard, a place she once studied as a case study in excellence. Now her place of employment, her daily bread, and her daily humiliation. Tonight was particularly tense. Table 7 was occupied by Julian Thorne. Thorne wasn't just wealthy. He was a titan of the tech industry, the founder of Kronos Corp, a man whose net worth fluctuated with the market, but always remained in the realm of the astronomical. He carried his power not with quiet confidence, but as a weapon. He was in his late 40s with silvering hair cut with razor-sharp precision and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold, clear, and utterly dismissive. He was with a younger woman, a model whose laughter seemed as manufactured as the diamonds sparkling at her throat. From the moment he sat down, Thorne had been a storm of quiet demands. The water, he'd said, not looking at Ella, but at the crystal glass, as if it had personally offended him. "Is this from a tap I specifically requested, San Pellegrino?" Chilled, not cold, Ella had already brought the requested water. "My apologies, sir. This is the San Pellegrino. Perhaps I can bring you a fresh bottle," she'd offered, her voice even. He waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Just be more attentive." The appetizers came and went. He sent back the seared foie gras, claiming the fig compote was a degree too sweet a criticism, so esoteric it was clearly designed to assert dominance, rather than offer genuine feedback. The sommelier, a man with decades of experience, was grilled on the vintage of a Chateau Margaux, as if he were a lying schoolboy. Thorne enjoyed making people squirm. It was his sport, Ella maintained her composure, a silent ghost, ensuring glasses were filled, crumbs were cleared, and the delicate dance of service continued uninterrupted. She moved with an efficiency that was born from both her training and her desperation. She couldn't afford a complaint, not with her father's next round of treatment looming. The main course arrived, a dry-aged ribeye for Thorne, cooked medium rare, and a lobster risotto for his companion. Ella placed the plates down with the care of a surgeon. Thorne picked up his steak knife, a heavy silver instrument. He sliced into the meat. The inside was a perfect warm red. He chewed a piece slowly, his jaw working, his eyes fixed on Ella, as if daring her to breathe. It's acceptable, he finally declared, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence, narrowly avoided. He then turned his attention to the wine. He swirled it, sniffed it, and took a sip. His face soured. "This is not the 09, he stated, his voice low and dangerous. "Sir, I can assure you," I opened the 2009 bottle, tableside myself. Ella replied, her heart starting to pound. She had followed the procedure to the letter. "Are you contradicting me?" he asked, his voice dropping further. The model beside him shifted uncomfortably, her practiced smile faltering. "Not at all, sir. I am simply stating what I know to be true. If you are unsatisfied, I would be happy to bring the bottle and the cork for your inspection, or have our sommelier return." This was a mistake. Offering proof implied he could be wrong, and Julian Thorne was never wrong. He placed his knife and fork down with a soft, deliberate clink that echoed in the suddenly silent space around their table. He leaned forward, his cold eyes pinning her to the spot. "You're new here, aren't you?" he said, though it wasn't a question. "I've been with Ethelgard for several months, sir." Several months, he mused, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "And in all those months, has no one taught you your place? Your job is to take my order, bring my food, and remain invisible. It is not to argue, it is not to assure me of anything. It is to obey." Ella's face burned. Years of professional training warred with the primal urge to defend herself. She could feel the eyes of the other patrons, the pitying glances of her fellow staff. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Gerald, was hovering near the kitchen door, his face pale. She swallowed the words catching in her throat. "My only intention was to provide the best service, sir." "Your best service," he scoffed, leaning back in his chair and looking her up and down, his gaze lingering on her sensible worn shoes. It was a look of utter contempt, as if he were examining an insect. "Your best is mediocre. You have the air of someone who doesn't belong here. Someone playing dress-up." He picked up his napkin, dabbed his lips, and then let it fall to the floor. "Pick that up," he commanded softly. Time seemed to slow down. It was a blatant, calculated act of humiliation. Every fiber of her being screamed in protest. The Cornell graduate, the aspiring manager, the daughter of a proud man, wanted to tell him exactly where he could put his napkin. But the waitress, the woman with stacks of medical bills on her kitchen counter, knew she had no choice. Her hand trembled slightly as she bent down her back, stiff with indignation. She picked up the fine linen napkin, the faint scent of his cologne clinging to it. As she rose, their eyes met. That's when he delivered the final blow. "Let me give you some free advice," Julian Thorne said, his voice a silken weapon. "A lesson in life. Some people are born to sit at this table, and some are born to serve it. It's a simple, universal truth. You should learn to accept it. Know your place. Because a place like this, a world like this, is not for people like you." He then dismissed her with a flick of his wrist, turning back to his companion, as if Ella had ceased to exist. She stood there for a second, frozen, the napkin clutched in her hand. The words echoed in her mind, each one a fresh cut. Know your place. Not for people like you. It wasn't just an insult to her as a waitress. It was a judgment on her entire existence, on her fallen circumstances, on the dreams she had been forced to sacrifice. With superhuman effort, she composed herself. She placed the napkin neatly on the edge of the table, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Will there be anything else, mister?" Thorne, she asked, her voice a ghost of its former warmth. He didn't even look at her. Just the check. And send someone else to collect it. Ella walked away from the table, her head held high, but inside she was shattering. She made it to the alcove by the kitchen doors before the facade crumbled. She leaned against the cool wall, her breathing ragged, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. Her manager, Gerald, scurried over. "Ella, are you all right?" "Don't worry about him, he's a monster. I'll handle the table from here." She just nodded, unable to speak. She pushed through the swinging doors into the cacophony of the kitchen. The sounds of clattering pans and shouting chefs were a welcome distraction from the deafening roar of humiliation in her ears. She finished her shift in a numb daze, moving like an automaton. That night on the subway ride back to her small Queens apartment, Thorne's words played on a loop. Know your place. What was her place? A tiny apartment filled with the smell of antiseptic from her father's latest hospital stay. A life defined by exhaustion and the constant gnawing fear of the next bill. She let herself into the quiet apartment. A photo on the mantelpiece showed her and her father on her graduation day, both of them beaming. In the picture, she was wearing a cap and gown, her diploma held aloft like a trophy. She looked like a woman who could conquer the world. Now she felt like a woman the world had conquered. She sank onto her worn-out sofa, the weight of the day, the month, the year pressing down on her. The tears she had held back all night finally came hot and bitter. She wept for her father, for her lost career, and for the bright, confident young woman in the photograph who seemed like a stranger. Julian Thorne had wanted to make her feel small and insignificant, and in the lonely silence of her apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her derailed life, Ella Vance had to admit with a soul-crushing certainty that he had succeeded. The week that followed the incident with Julian Thorne was a study in grey. The vibrant colours of Ella's spirit had been muted, washed out by the acid of his words. Every time she put on her uniform, she felt like she was putting on a costume of failure. Every polite smile felt like a lie. Thorne's pronouncement, "not for people like you," had become an insidious whisper in her mind, validating every insecurity she harboured. She was on the verge of quitting, of walking away from Ethelgard and the daily reminders of her diminished station. Maybe she could find a job in a diner, a place with less pretension and fewer opportunities for soul-crushing condescension. It was a drizzly Tuesday afternoon, her day off. She was sitting at her small kitchen table, a mountain of paperwork in front of her. Not her old Cornell textbooks on revenue management, but a labyrinth of insurance forms and hospital invoices. The numbers swam before her eyes, a relentless tide of debt. Her phone buzzed an unknown number with a Manhattan area code, probably another collections agency. She ignored it. It buzzed again, persistent. With a sigh of resignation, she answered, preparing her well-rehearsed speech about payment plans. "Hello," she said, her voice flat. "Am I speaking with Ella Vance?" a man's voice asked. It was warm, familiar, with a kind academic timbre that plucked a chord deep in her memory. "This is she." "Ella, this is Arthur Pendleton. I'm not sure if you remember me. I was your professor for hospitality leadership and ethics at Cornell." Ella's posture straightened instantly. "Professor Pendleton." She remembered him vividly. He was a legend in the hotel school, a retired CEO of a luxury hotel chain who had returned to academia to shape the next generation. He was brilliant exacting and possessed a quiet integrity that she had always admired. He had been her thesis advisor, the one who had written her most glowing letter of recommendation. Professor Pendleton. Of course I remember you. It's an honor to hear from you, sir. The honor is all mine, Ella. I always knew you were one of my brightest students, which is why I was surprised and frankly a little concerned when you fell off the map a couple of years ago. I trust you and your family are well. The question was so genuine, so kind, that it almost broke her. We've had some challenges, sir. She admitted, her voice thick with emotion. My father has been ill. I am truly sorry to hear that, he said, and she could tell he meant it. Your father must be very proud of the resilience you're showing. It takes a unique kind of strength to face adversity with grace. Ella was taken aback. How would you know that, sir? Because, Ella, I've been watching you, he said, and the conversation took a sudden, unexpected turn. I recently came out of retirement, so to speak. I led an investment group that has just acquired the Ethelgard restaurant. Ella's breath hitched. Ethelgard Professor Pendleton owned Ethelgard. Her mind raced, replaying every interaction. She'd had every moment of service, with a horrifying new clarity. Had he seen her being humiliated by Julian Thorne? As if reading her mind, he continued, I've been dining there incognito for the past few weeks, observing the operations before we finalize the transition. I've observed the staff, the management, the clientele. I was there last Tuesday night. The bottom dropped out of Ella's stomach. He had seen it all, the condescension, the demand, the napkin on the floor, the soul-crushing defeat in her eyes. The shame washed over her anew. Sir, she began, not knowing what to say. Ella, he interrupted gently. What I saw that night was not a waitress being put in her place. I saw a consummate professional holding her own against a bully of the highest order. I saw you handle an impossible situation with a level of dignity and control that most seasoned managers would envy. What Julian Thorne saw as weakness, I saw as immense strength. She was speechless. She had felt so small, so powerless, yet her mentor had seen something entirely different. The reason I'm calling Ella is not to reminisce. Ethelgard is a magnificent restaurant with a fatal flaw. Its culture is broken. It caters to the whims of men like Thorne, and in doing so, it grinds down the very people who create the magic. The current manager, Gerald, is a good man, but he's terrified. He manages from a place of fear. That is going to change. I'm making a change in leadership. A drastic one. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I'm looking for a new general manager, someone with the formal training to understand the business, the grit to handle the pressure, and the empathy to heal the staff. Someone who understands what it's like on the floor, who knows what the staff endures, and who will have their back. Someone who embodies the very principles of leadership and ethics we discussed in my classroom. Ella's heart was hammering against her ribs. She couldn't possibly be thinking. Ella Arthur Pendleton, said his voice, firm and clear. I want you to be the new general manager of Ethelgard. The world tilted on its axis. The kitchen around her, with its stacks of bills and chipped countertops, seemed to fade away. General manager. Her the waitress who just last week was told she didn't belong. It was ludicrous. It was impossible. Professor, I don't know what to say, she stammered. I'm a waitress. I haven't been in a management role since my internship." "Nonsense," he said sharply. "You've been managing every single night. You've managed egos, expectations, logistics, and crises, all while balancing 6 plates on your arm. The title is a formality. I've seen your resume, I remember your thesis on employee-centric service models. I know what you're capable of. The question is, do you—" The doubt, seeded by Thorn and watered by her circumstances, was a powerful weed. "But the staff, they know me as one of them. How can I possibly lead them, and people like Mr. Thorn? How can I face them? You will lead the staff, because you are one of them," Arthur countered. "You will earn their respect, not by decree, but by understanding. And as for Mr. Thorn, well, let's just say, I have a feeling he's in for a lesson on the true meaning of the words. Know your place. I will be there to support you every step of the way. I'm not just offering you a job, Ella. I'm offering you a chance to reclaim what was taken from you. To finish the story you started at Cornell. To build something better." He was offering her a lifeline, but it felt more like a thunderbolt. It was a chance to not only restore her own dignity, but to create a sanctuary of respect for everyone who worked within those walls. It was a chance to turn her greatest humiliation into her defining moment. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But for the first time in 2 years, another feeling began to push through it, a fierce, burning flicker of hope. The image of Julian Thorne's smug, contemptuous face flashed in her mind, and then the memory of her father's proud smile on her graduation day. She knew which memory she wanted to define her future. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the air filling her lungs with a newfound resolve. "Yes," she said, her voice no longer trembling, but ringing with a conviction she hadn't felt in years. "Yes, Professor. I accept." A warm smile was evident in Arthur Pendleton's voice. "I knew you would. Welcome back to the game, Miss Vance. Now let's get to work. You have a restaurant to run." As she hung up the phone, Ella looked at the pile of bills on her table. They no longer looked like a mountain. They looked like fuel. The week that followed was a whirlwind transformation. Ella met daily with Arthur Pendleton in a discreet downtown office, a world away from the clatter of Æthelgard's kitchen. He didn't just hand her the keys, he armed her for the throne. They pored over profit and loss statements, vendor contracts, and staff files. Arthur, with his decades of wisdom, acted as her private tutor, refining the raw talent he'd first spotted in his lecture hall. "The numbers tell a story, Ella," he'd say, pointing to a spreadsheet. "See this high staff turnover in the last quarter. High breakage costs. This isn't a sign of bad employees. It's a sign of a high-stress, low-morale environment. People rush when they're scared. They quit when they're not valued." He listened intently as she laid out her initial ideas, not just for the menu or the wine list, but for the people. She proposed a new system for tip pooling that was more equitable between front of house and back of house. She suggested a formal staff meal before every service, a tradition common in Europe that fostered camaraderie. She drafted a new employee handbook, the first page of which was a simple, powerful mission statement on mutual respect. "This is excellent," Arthur said, reading her draft. "You're not just changing the rules, you're changing the culture. That's real leadership." Her transformation was also physical. The first thing Arthur did was give her a generous advance on her salary. "Invest in yourself," he'd said. "Your appearance is not for the benefit of men like Thorn. It's a reflection of how you see yourself." Ella went shopping not with extravagance but with purpose. The sensible, worn-out Waitress shoes were replaced with elegant, comfortable heels. She bought a collection of beautifully tailored business dresses and power suits in shades of charcoal navy and deep burgundy. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the weary waitress. She saw Ms. Vance, the general manager, the woman she was always meant to be. The day of the reveal arrived. It was a Monday, the day Ethelgard was closed to the public. Arthur had called an all-staff mandatory meeting for 10 a.m. No one knew the reason, and the air in the main dining room was thick with nervous speculation. Was the new owner shutting them down? Were there going to be layoffs? Gerald, the outgoing manager, stood nervously by the entrance, wringing his hands. The staff waiters, hosts, bussers, sommelier, and the kitchen crew in their whites were gathered in a loose, anxious cluster among the tables. At precisely 10 a.m., the main doors opened. Arthur Pendleton walked in, projecting an aura of calm authority, and right beside him walked Ella. A wave of confusion rippled through the room. Whispers broke out. "Isn't that Ella? What is she doing with him? Did she get fired?" Ella's heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her face was a mask of calm composure. She walked past her former colleagues, her head held high, and took her place beside Arthur at the front of the room. She made eye contact with a few of them: Maria, the hostess, who had always been kind to her; Javier, the busboy, who was working 2 jobs to support his family; and Marcus, the ambitious assistant manager, who had always treated her with a vague, competitive disdain. She saw shock, confusion, and in Marcus's eyes, a flicker of outright hostility. Arthur cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice filling the space. "Thank you for coming. As you know, my firm has recently acquired this fine establishment. I have spent the last few weeks observing, and I've seen a team of incredibly talented and hard-working individuals. But I've also seen a culture of fear and anxiety that is holding this restaurant back from its true potential. That ends today." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the crowd. Effective immediately, Gerald will be stepping down from his role as general manager. We thank him for his years of service. He gestured to Gerald, who gave a weak, watery smile. "In his place, I am appointing someone who I believe has the vision, the strength, and the unique experience to lead Ethelgard into a new era. Someone who knows this restaurant from the ground up. Someone who understands your challenges because she has lived them. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to your new general manager, Ms. Ella Vance." If the room had been confused before, it was now utterly stunned into silence. Jaws literally dropped. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if they were all trying to process an impossible reality. The waitress they had shared shifts with, complained with, and pitied just a week ago was now their boss. Then Javier, the young busboy, started clapping. It was a slow, hesitant clap at first, but it was genuine. Maria, the hostess, joined in a wide, incredulous smile on her face. Soon, a smattering of applause broke out, a mixture of shock and burgeoning hope. Ella stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked out at their faces, her team. "Thank you, Mr. Pendleton," she said, her voice steady and clear. "And thank you, everyone. I know this is unexpected." A small, knowing smile touched her lips. "I see a lot of familiar faces. Many of you know me. You know I've cleared your tables, I've polished your silverware, and I've taken orders alongside you. I've also felt the sting of disrespect from a guest and the ache in my feet after a 12-hour shift." She saw nods of recognition. They were listening. "My door will always be open," she continued. "My leadership will be built on 3 principles: respect, trust, and excellence. Respect for each other from the dishwasher to the sommelier. Trust that I will always have your back. And a shared commitment to an excellence that comes not from fear, but from pride in our work. We are going to make Ethelgard not just the best restaurant in New York for our patrons, but the best place to work for our staff." She then laid out her initial changes, the new tip pooling system, the staff meals, the zero-tolerance policy for abuse from guests. With every sentence, you could feel the atmosphere in the room shift, the tension and anxiety being replaced by a palpable sense of relief and excitement. When she finished, the applause was no longer hesitant. It was loud, sustained, and genuine. She had won them over. Well, most of them. As the meeting broke up and the staff crowded around her with questions and congratulations, she saw Marcus, the assistant manager, lingering at the back of the room. His arms were crossed, and his face was a mask of resentment. He had clearly seen the GM position as his own, and to have it snatched away by a waitress was an insult he couldn't stomach. This, she knew, would be her first internal challenge. The rest of the day was spent in one-on-one meetings, getting her new office in order and working with the chef on the week's menu. A sense of purpose hummed through her veins. This felt right. This was her place. The week flew by. The new policies were implemented, and the change in morale was immediate and dramatic. The staff seemed to walk taller. The energy in the restaurant was lighter, more collaborative. Marcus remained aloof, doing his job with a cold efficiency, but making it clear he was not on her team. Ella knew she would have to win him over, not with words, but with actions. It was Friday night, a week after her promotion. The restaurant was fully booked, humming with the energy of the New York elite. Ella, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, moved through the dining room not as a servant, but as a commander. She oversaw the flow, assisted the hosts, spoke with guests, and exuded an air of complete control. Around 9 p.m., the hostess Maria approached her, a worried look on her face. "Ms. Vance," she said, her voice low. "We have a walk-in. Table 7. It's him." Ella didn't need to ask who him was. A cold dread, a phantom of her past life, washed over her. She looked towards the entrance, and there he was. Julian Thorne stood at the host stand, looking as arrogant and imperious as ever. He was tapping his finger impatiently on the marble surface, his gaze sweeping the room with proprietary disdain. He hadn't seen her yet. He was speaking to Maria, his voice carrying just enough to be heard. "I don't care if you're full," he was saying. "It's my table. Get the manager, the little nervous one. He always finds a spot for me." Maria looked at Ella, her eyes wide, with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The entire staff seemed to be holding its breath. The moment of reckoning had arrived far sooner than she had anticipated. Ella took a deep breath, straightened her jacket, and smoothed down her suit. The fear was there, but it was now overshadowed by a formidable ice-cold resolve. She was no longer Ella the waitress. She was Miss Vance, the general manager, and this was her house. She began to walk towards the front of the restaurant, her heels clicking purposefully on the polished hardwood floor, towards the man who had tried to shatter her, towards a confrontation that would redefine both of their places in the world. Julian Thorne looked up as she approached, a flicker of annoyance on his face, ready to berate whoever this was for the delay. He was about to speak, but his eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of vague recognition in their icy depths. He couldn't quite place the face, but he knew with the certainty of a predator that he had seen this woman before. Julian Thorne's mind, a machine calibrated for recognizing assets and threats, was momentarily stuck. He saw a woman approaching with an air of authority that was utterly at odds with the vague, subservient memory he was trying to grasp. She was tall, poised, her dark blue suit impeccably tailored. There was a sharpness in her eyes he hadn't seen before. He dismissed his fleeting thought. She was probably the new maitre d', another cog in the machine. Finally he snapped, before she was even fully in front of him. "I've been waiting. I need my table. Table 7, and tell the manager Gerald that my usual Cabernet should be decanting by the time I sit down." Don't make me wait again." He didn't look at her. He was already scanning the dining room as if he owned it. Ella stopped directly in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. She stood perfectly still, letting the silence stretch for a beat longer than was comfortable. She could feel the entire restaurant watching from the corners of their eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was not the timid, deferential whisper he remembered. It was calm, measured, and held a note of cool steel. "Welcome to Ethelgard." He finally focused on her, and this time the recognition dawned. The frown on his face deepened, contorting into a mask of confusion and irritation. He remembered her now. The clumsy, argumentative waitress, the one he'd put in her place. What was she doing in a suit? He said the word, dripping with disdain. "I remember you. They let you work the host stand now, a bold choice. Did you forget our last conversation? I believe I made my preferences for service quite clear." He smirked. "Go and get me the manager. Now." This was the moment, the culmination of a week of preparation, of 2 years of struggle. Ella felt a strange, liberating calm settle over her. "Gerald is no longer with us," she stated simply. "And as for the manager," she paused, savoring the moment. "You're speaking to her." She extended a hand. Ella Vance, the new general manager of Ethelgard. The silence that followed was profound. Julian Thorne stared at her outstretched hand as if it were a snake. He looked from her face to her suit, to the confident set of her shoulders, and back to her eyes, which were now locked on his unwavering. The smirk on his face evaporated, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. His mind reeled, unable to compute this new reality. The waitress, the little no-one he had crushed under his heel, the GM. It was impossible. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. You're the manager. This is a joke, right? A pathetic little prank, I can assure you, Mr. Thorne. My position is no joke," Ella replied, slowly, retracting her still unshaken hand. "I was appointed by the new owner, Mr. Pendleton." Thorne's face darkened with rage. The shock was now curdling into fury. He was being challenged, contradicted by someone he considered less than nothing. His entire worldview, a rigid hierarchy with him at the top, was being threatened. "I don't believe you," he spat. "I'll have you fired. I'll buy this place and turn it into a parking lot just to see you back on the street. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Oh, I know exactly who you are, Mr. Thorne." Ella said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I have a very clear memory of our last encounter. In fact, it was partly because of that encounter that Mr. Pendleton offered me this position. You see, the new management has a different philosophy. We believe a person's worth isn't determined by their bank account, but by their character. And their place is something they earn, not something they are assigned by others." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart puncturing his inflated ego. He was speechless, his face turning a blotchy red. He was losing control, and in his world that was the ultimate sin. "I want to speak to the owner." He finally bellowed his voice, loud enough to make several nearby diners turn and stare openly. "Get him on the phone. I'll have this sorted out in 5 minutes. That won't be necessary." A new voice, calm and resonant, joined the confrontation. Arthur Pendleton emerged from the entryway to his small private office, just off the main dining room. He had been watching the entire exchange, a silent observer, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. He walked over to stand beside Ella, presenting a united front. Thorne's jaw went slack. He knew Arthur Pendleton, not personally, but by reputation. He was old money, a titan of a different era, a man whose influence was more subtle, but no less potent, than Thorne's own. Arthur Pendleton. Thorne stammered, his blustering rage deflating slightly into confusion. "What are you doing here? "I own the place," Arthur said with a simple, disarming smile. "And I can confirm that Miss Vance is indeed our new general manager. She has my complete and total confidence. In fact, she is already proving to be one of the best investments I've ever made." He placed a reassuring hand on Ella's shoulder. The message was clear: she is with me. Thorne was trapped. He had no leverage. He couldn't bully, he couldn't threaten. He was utterly outmaneuvered. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from his neck to his face. "Now about your table, mister." Thorne. Ella said, her voice all business again. She glanced at the booking screen at the host stand. "Unfortunately, as you can see, we are fully committed this evening. We have a strict policy of honoring our reservations." "But that's my table," he insisted, his voice now pleading desperate. "It was never your table, sir," Ella corrected him gently. "It belongs to the restaurant, and tonight it belongs to the party who had the foresight to book it in advance." She then delivered the final elegant checkmate. "However, we do have a new policy here at Ethelgard, one of decorum and mutual respect. Any guest who is unable to treat our staff with basic courtesy will unfortunately find that we have no tables available for them. Not tonight. Not ever." It was his own behavior, his own words now weaponized against him. He had been blacklisted from his favorite power spot, not by a faceless corporation, but by the very waitress he had tried to destroy. From the corner of the room, Marcus, the skeptical assistant manager, watched the entire scene unfold. He had expected Ella to crumble. He had secretly hoped for it. Instead, he saw a display of strength control and tactical brilliance that he had never witnessed from their old manager. He saw a leader protecting her territory and her principles. In that moment, his resentment dissolved, replaced by a dawning, profound respect. Julian Thorne stood there exposed and powerless. The other patrons were now openly watching their faces, a mixture of shock and quiet amusement. The story would be all over the city's gossip circles by morning. He had two choices: retreat in disgrace or escalate, and make a bigger fool of himself. For the first time in a long time, he chose retreat. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the restaurant, his face a thunderous mask of impotent fury. The heavy glass door swung shut behind him, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Then the dining room erupted, not in loud cheers, but in a wave of quiet, appreciative applause from the staff. Maria beamed at Ella. Javier gave her a thumbs up from across the room. The sommelier raised his glass in a silent toast, and Marcus, the assistant manager, walked over to her, his expression completely changed. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice full of a new, genuine respect. "That was incredible." "What are your orders?" Ella looked at her team, united and inspired. She looked at Arthur, who was beaming with pride. She had not only faced her demon, she had vanquished him. She had not just earned her place, she had defined it on her own terms. "Our orders, Marcus," she said with a confident smile, "are to give our guests the most wonderful evening of their lives." In the weeks and months that followed, Ethelgard wasn't just a restaurant. It became a testament to Ella's vision. The culture of fear was systematically dismantled and replaced with one of collaborative pride. The staff meal before service became a cherished ritual, a time for the team to connect, share ideas, and start each night on a united front. With Marcus now, her loyal and enthusiastic right hand, Ella implemented training programs promoted from within and ensured that every single employee from the sous chef to the porter felt seen and valued. The results were astonishing. Staff turnover plummeted to nearly zero. The service, already good, became legendary. It had a new warmth, a genuine attentiveness that flowed from a happy, empowered team. Patrons noticed the change. The atmosphere was still exclusive, but it was no longer cold. Ethelgard became the most sought-after reservation in New York, not just for its Michelin-starred food, but for its soul. Revenue soared. Ella, for her part, had never felt more alive. She worked long hours, but they were hours filled with purpose. She moved with an easy confidence, her Cornell education finally put to its intended use. The trauma of her past had been reforged into a source of profound empathy and strength. She made sure her father received the best possible care, his mounting medical bills no longer a source of terror, but a manageable expense. He was responding well to treatment, his health improving almost in lockstep with his daughter's triumphant rise. One crisp autumn afternoon, Arthur Pendleton's secretary informed Ella that Julian Thorne had requested a meeting, not at the restaurant, but at Arthur's private office. He had made a formal offer through his lawyers to buy Ethelgard for a sum that was by any measure astronomical, nearly double its market value. Ella felt a chill run down her spine. Thorne wasn't just trying to get his table back. He was trying to buy back his power, to erase his humiliation, by owning the very stage it had played out on. He wanted to fire her, and he was willing to pay an obscene amount of money for the privilege. She and Arthur met in the same boardroom where he had first offered her the job. "Are you considering it?" Ella asked, her voice steady, though her heart was not. Arthur looked at her, his expression serious. "It's a remarkable offer, Ella. Financially, it would be a huge win for our investors." He let that hang in the air for a moment before his face broke into a wry smile. "But I've always believed that some things aren't for sale." When Julian Thorne arrived, he looked different. He was still impeccably dressed, but the arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a tense, brittle energy. He addressed Arthur directly, ignoring Ella. "Pendleton," he began, forgoing any pleasantries. "You've seen the offer. It's more than generous. Name your price. I'll meet it." Arthur leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "It's not about the price, Julian. I'm curious. Why are you so determined to buy my restaurant? It's a business decision," Thorne said, a little too quickly. "A portfolio diversification." "Is it," Arthur replied, his voice gentle but probing, "or is it about Ms. Vance?" Thorne's jaw tightened. He finally looked at Ella, his eyes a cold mix of resentment and grudging respect. "She has proven to be more formidable than I anticipated." "Indeed she has," Arthur said. "Let me tell you a story, Julian. Many years ago, my own daughter, my only child, had a passion for hospitality. She took a job as a waitress while in college, wanting to learn the business from the ground up, much like Miss Vance. She was bright, she was kind, she was full of potential. And one night, a man, a wealthy, powerful man, much like yourself, humiliated her in front of an entire dining room. He made her feel worthless. He broke her spirit. She quit the next day and never set foot in a restaurant again. She lost her passion, her dream, because one man felt the need to assert his dominance." Arthur's voice was filled with a quiet, ancient pain. "I bought Ethelgard not just as an investment, Julian. I bought it to create a place where what happened to my daughter could never happen again. I hired Miss Vance because I saw in her the same resilience my own daughter should have been allowed to foster. What she is building is more than a successful business. It's a legacy. It's a sanctuary of dignity." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Thorne's. "So no, Julian, the restaurant is not for sale. Because what you are trying to buy is something you can't put a price on a second chance. And you are the last person on earth I would sell that to." It was a final, devastating blow. Thorne wasn't just being denied a business deal. He was being judged on a moral level and found wanting. The vast fortune he used as a shield was useless here. He sat there for a long moment, the silence of the boardroom pressing in on him. He looked smaller, diminished. He finally stood, nodded curtly, and left without another word. The story ends not with Thorne's utter destruction, but with his quiet defeat. And it ends with Ella's quiet, powerful triumph. Months later, she stood in the bustling dining room of Ethelgard on a busy Saturday night. The room was filled with laughter and conversation. Her team moved with a seamless, happy efficiency. She caught her reflection in one of the large, gilded mirrors. She saw a woman who was strong, respected, and content. A woman who had found her true place, not a place given to her by birthright, or assigned to her by someone else's prejudice, but a place she had forged herself through resilience, integrity, and the unwavering belief in the dignity of all work. She had not just taken back her own future. She had built a better one for everyone around her. In the end, Julian Thorne's words came true, but not in the way he intended. Ella Vance did learn her place. She learned that her place was not on her knees picking up a napkin, but at the helm of a successful enterprise. Her place was not in the shadows of someone else's power, but in the light of her own hard-earned success. She learned that your true place in the world is never defined by the judgment of others, but by the strength of your own character and the courage to rewrite your own story. Thank you for watching this incredible story of resilience and redemption. So many of us have faced moments where we've been made to feel small. If Ella's journey inspired you, please let us know in the comments below. What was the most powerful moment for you? Don't forget to hit that like button. If you believe in the power of second chances, share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will move and motivate you. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.